All right, so we are going to use Photoshop to put our pictures together. So like I said, normally we would use Lightroom to adjust the pictures. And if you want to make adjustments to your pictures beforehand, you're welcome to do that in Lightroom and then resave them out. But we are going to use Photoshop to put these together. If you do not have Photoshop on your iPad, you should from first semester. But if you don't, again, you can go to self-service on your iPad, and self-service should have the Photoshop icon there that you can download. Also, when you go to start it for the first time, you will use your school email address and your ID number with no zeros to log in, and just make sure that you are selecting school or company account and not personal account, right? So we'll start this thing up here, just like so. I'm going to create a new project. So down here in the bottom left-hand corner, it says Create New. And then depending on what your picture is, it could be vertical or horizontal. I'm going to guess that probably 99.9% of your pictures are going to be horizontal. I'm just going to choose this one in the upper left-hand corner, Landscape 8 by 10. And then I'm going to make sure the resolution says 300 pixels per inch, which is over here on the right-hand side. You can also see that as well. So that's what you want yours to look like. You can change the orientation here, vertical or horizontal. But I would say by default, that's what you're going to leave it as. I'm going to say Create. And this is where you're going to glue your pieces together here. Now, if you have a picture that's an appropriate size, you could also just open that picture directly. So I could also import and open here. But for our purposes here, I think I'm going to try to make these pictures fit inside. Oops. I'm going to try to make these pictures fit inside my background here. So I can pinch my screen with my two fingers to move it and rotate it a little bit. And the first thing I need to do now is get my background picture into my image. And I can see over here on the right-hand side, these are my layers, right? I'm clicking this button on the top. Here's my one below it. Oops. Put that away. So here I'm going to use the second button down. This is going to show my layer. So layer 1 is just my background layer. Now on this side, if I don't see the picture on the right here, it's this lastmost picture here at the bottom. I'm going to click on here where it says Photos. If you don't see this, just scroll up with your on the left-hand side. You can move that bar up and down if it doesn't fit in that window completely. I'm going to say Photos. I'm going to look for my photos that I have here. I think they're down at the bottom, if I recall. Here they are. I'm going to select this photo, and I'm going to put it right in the background here. Now, you can see that there's some extra space in the upper and lower parts of this picture. If you want to, you can just move this picture out so that it fits perfectly. Just do me a favor and you don't want to grab these on the sides, because see how it makes the picture all wonky like that? You do not want to do that. You do not want to just squeeze it so that it fits in the picture, because it's going to look weird. So just grab that picture by the corner and try to pull it directly out in the corner, right? Because this way it'll do it in proportion, just like so. And then I can also move it over a little bit, because right here, right, if I want to make sure that I give myself a little bit of room here on the side, so I'm going to pull it over this way, and I'm going to snap it, oops, to the edge like that. So you can see it's a little over to the left, but that's okay, because again, that's where I'm going to put my own self. So after I get it stuck in here, I get it exactly where I want it to. I'm going to say Done, and I have my first one. And then I can see on the right-hand side, it says Lighting Match Raw. That's just the name of the picture that I named it there. And you can see that it sits above layer 1. Now you remember, the layers, as they sit here, the top layer is the layer that's in front, right? So I'm going to come in here next. I'm going to say Photos again. Scroll down to the bottom. And I'm going to find the picture that I have of myself, just like that. All right, well, this is not me, but I have, it's going to be the picture of yourselves. And then I'm going to leave it here, and I can see on my Layers menu, I'm going to say, well, let's try to get it the right size first. So I'm going to look here. I'm going to make her a little bigger. I don't want to make her too big, because I want her to look like she's a little smaller than the people. Oops. But that looks pretty good just like that. All right. Maybe make her just a tiny bit smaller, just like that. All right, then I'm going to say Done. So now if I look in my Layers menu, again, I have the choice of switching between layers that I'm going to work on. And now I want to make sure that I've selected, I just want to work on that top layer like that. Okay? So by working on that top layer, everything that I do is just going to affect that layer that's on the very top up there. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get rid of that background. Now I could just erase with my eraser, but remember we want to use layer masks, because layer masks are not permanent. and we can also adjust the edges of our layer mask so that they will look a little bit cleaner. So to select this person here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my selection tool, and I'm going to hold on my finger, and I'm going to see that I have some choices here. I can do some hand drawing, right? That's just the lasso tool like this. And I can try to select part of this picture that I want to select here. And you can see my selections at the bottom show up. Let me get this out of here. I don't want that to show up in my recording. Right? I delete, mask, erase, all that different stuff. I'm going to say deselect because I don't like that one. If I hold my finger down here, I have this paintbrush one. And I can try to paint in this part like that. Right? But that paint one's also a little bit hard to control, but it's helpful. Right? So I'm going to say deselect on this one. But now the cool one that they have in here that works pretty well is if I hold on my finger and I say select subject. And give it a second. And look at that. It does a pretty nice job of just selecting the subject. Now, it missed a couple spots. There's a spot here by her arm. You can see that little joint in there that's missing, and the spot behind her head. But I'm going to deal with those later. Because the problem with this program here, well, actually, is that it's just heavy-handed. Like I'm using my finger here. You could try to use a stylus if you want to. But it's a little tricky here. On the left-hand side down here too, you can see I have some choices. But my selection, this is a minus selection, and this is a plus selection. See those two blue lights flashing there? My adding here, if I wanted to, I could say, let's do this one here. Let's see if I can just add this part here. All right, I zoomed in and I'm drawing this part here. Oops. There we go. I'm adding that to my selection here like that. There we go. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to try to do this too. There we go. So now I've got her in this selection here. So that looks pretty good. But now the other thing I can do here is if I click on this More button down here, I can do that refining edge. Right, what that refining edge is going to show me here is I can actually see the edge of my project. So right now, marching ants means it's that dotted line that's sort of happening around the outside edge here. If I select this drop down and I see overlay, I can see orange, I can see on black, I can see on white, or I can see the whole thing is black and white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to overlay, and I'm going to just try to see what, well, actually, maybe I'm going to do, yeah, I can't decide. Let's do overlay. What overlay is going to show me is it's going to show me what I'm seeing here, how the edge looks against this orange edge right here. So let's find, let's look at her hair back here is a good one here maybe. All right, so as I'm working on these buttons here, I can see my smoothing edge, I can see feathering, I can see contrast. So what feather does, what smoothing does is if you have a jaggedy selection here, it's going to smooth out. So you can sort of see that area, that space in her hair there. See the way those shapes sort of smooth out? So they're not going to have as many points in it. I'm not going to worry about smoothing too much. What feather does is you can see it softens the edge and lets that picture come through. You don't want to soften it too much. But a hard edge is like that. A little bit of feather in this just sort of softens that edge. Because the one thing you don't want this to do is you don't want it to look like it's just cut out. You want it to look like it sort of weaves into the other one. Contrast sort of counteracts that feather and it sharpens the edge a little bit. So those two sort of work against each other. And then shifting edge expands or contracts your selection. So if I say shift in a little bit, see the way it cleans up that edge? And if I shift out, I can start to see some of that gray edge on the outside. So I'm going to bring it in. A lot of times I feather and I shift here. You just want to be careful you don't over feather, because over feathering looks really bizarre. There you go. All right, so that's sort of like how you can shift that edge and you can make it look a little bit more interesting. Let me see. There's my brush for the other thing here. That's my pressure for that brush. All right, so then I'm going to say done. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So there we go. So now I have my mask. So then at the bottom here, I just click this button that says mask. And it totally masked out the background there. Totally cool, right? So now I have this figure. Oops. Here. And then if I want to move it, I have to use the moving tool at the top. I can move her around like this. Then I'm going to put her where I think she belongs for this popcorn. I'm going to put her just like that. All right, so that's where I think maybe her position is for eating that popcorn off to the side like so. Now the problem is she's still sort of showing up in this chair here. So I want to exclude her from the rest of this picture, right? Because it looks like she's sitting in front and I want her to look like she's behind the chair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily click this eyeball here. So see how I can make her appear and disappear like that. All right, I'm going to go back to my matching here, right? So I'm making sure I'm on the bottom layer. I'm going to zoom into this chair here a little bit. I'm going to select a different selecting tool. So I'm going to select this paintbrush, and I'm going to put her, I'm selecting that chair. So see how I selected that chair with the brush like that? Just like that. It's going to give me a nice clean line, and I'm going to select, I guess I'll select that chair down here too. So I selected this chair. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this layer like that. I'm going to use my paintbrush. I'm going to paint with black because black makes the mask disappear. If I look over here, I can't zoom into it, but if I look at the top layer, see how that layer mask is over here? Right over here. See how these two jump back and forth here? That layer mask, everywhere that's black, the picture is invisible. Everywhere that's white, the picture is showing. So I'm going to flip-flop my colors here. So I'm painting with black. I'm going to look at my brush here. So my opacity of my brush is 100%. The hardness of my brush, I don't know, is 90%. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger around. There we go. And oops. And I'm just going to paint her out here. But watch what happens here. It's only going to paint to that line of that selection. Oh, I got to get rid of her hand over here. See how it's only painting there? So now I can paint as much as I want to. It'll be a nice sharp line. And now it looks like she's sitting behind there. I'm going to say deselect. I'm going to paint her hand on there. There we go. And I put her right behind that seat. You know, and again, I can refine that edge. Here I can look at it and just make sure that it looks like she's sitting behind that seat. I can also see here that I lost, undo. I can also see that I lost her shoulder here a little bit, so I'm going to pull her over until her shoulder meets up with that spot there. That sort of messed with my seat though, so hang on, I'm going to go invisible, back here, select again. Deselect, please. Sorry, I selected the wrong one. There we go. I'm going to select that again. I'm going to show her again. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right one. I'm going to go to my layer mask. I'm going to go to my black paintbrush. And again, I'm going to paint her out right there. Just because I want to clean up that line right there. There we go. Just like so. So that is step one to your process there, is to get your picture in there, find it, adjust your layer mask, and see if you can make it look like it fits properly inside that window. Now the second thing is going to be, is you're going to want to add some adjustments to this, right? So this one below it is called a clipped adjustment. So if I'm here and I select this layer up here and I go down to my adjustments here, if I select something called a clipped adjustment, what the clipped adjustment is going to do, so let's do my color balance. She needs to be more pink. So what's going to happen is, you can see over here is the way that color balance clipped to the image right below it. So now if I push this color here a little bit, she is too yellow. Let's make her more blue. Right, this adjustment, see the way it's only adjusting her? Because it's a clipped adjustment, it's only adjusting her. There we go. So I'm just making her a little bit more, not quite magenta, but I'm just trying to warm her up a little bit so she looks like she is the same color lighting as those other people inside there. So that's one clipped adjustment, right? Oops, come on you. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say another clipped adjustment. And you saw what I did there was I had to select. So here, it's not going to let me put another clipped adjustment on top of an adjustment. So I have to go back to the picture that I want to clip an adjustment to, and I'm going to say here, and I'm going to say exposure, right? So again, it's clipping it here, and I can just adjust the exposure on her. And I'm barely moving the exposure on her because I just want her to blend in a little bit. So I'm adjusting the gamma here, and I'm just trying to get that lighting in here. All right, so I'm going to put that away. So here I can see, and those little arrows at the top are showing me that those are clipped adjustments. So it's looking pretty good, right? It's looking like she sort of belongs in there. The other thing that you may need to do at some point is put a shadow in your piece, right? So really the best way to do a shadow is under plus here, is I would just add a new layer, right? And make sure that it's outside of your clipped adjustments there. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to use my black paintbrush. Oh, it's too big. And I'm just going to paint. Oh, I can do that. I'm going to paint where I think the shadow should be. So I'm just doing this randomly. I don't really need a shadow, but I'm just going to pretend that I do. So let's pretend that I need a shadow here, like this. So I sort of painted that in here. What you can do is you can adjust the layer opacity. So by clicking on this little 3 buttons here is like your layer properties. Watch what happens when I turn the opacity down that layer. See, it sort of becomes just a shadow like that. I can also mess with the blending mode a little bit. That's not going to work because it's not in the right color here. Yeah. That's not going to work. There, overlay. Yeah, it makes it sort of a weird color. So we're just going to stick with normal for now. But you can turn on the opacity. You can also use an eraser. Right? There's some different ones in here. We're just going to use soft round. And I'm going to turn the pressure of my brush down here. So the hardness is 0. The opacity, I'm going to turn this down to like, I don't know, 40% here, maybe even less. Let's do here. Yeah, I need that brush to be bigger. Oops. I just want a nice soft brush here. Here we go. See the way I'm sort of feathering that edge there? So some of your shadows might need to be softer. Maybe a little bit big now. Because I'm just trying to soften those shadows up a little bit. And shadows are hard because you really have to sort of look at where the light is and how the light hits your subject and creates a shadow. That's more, if we have some scientists out there, some science photographers, that is the best way to do it because, like I said, shadows can be very tricky to figure out like the right angle. There we go. Sort of erasing that. You know, and you can come back and forth and try. So again, you can see that shadow here, just to sort of give you an idea of how you might add a little bit of shadow to your picture there. So but again, this picture doesn't need a shadow. But I just wanted to show that to you. All right, so there you go. So then when you are done with this, you would just go to your up arrow here. I'm going to export. JPEG is what we're going to want. I'm going to say high quality size, standard format is fine. I'm going to say export. And I'm going to say save image. You can send it elsewhere, but I'm just going to say save image. It's asking if we can add to my photos. I'm going to say OK. And then it should be, oops, complete. And there it is right here. So that's the guy that I just saved, and then that's going to be the final picture that you're going to upload in the end.